Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of season 3 of Bobble Pod. As always, before we begin, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast platforms. If you're watching this on YouTube, press the bell button in the bottom left corner, right corner, depending on how you're viewing the screen, for notifications. And again, let us know what you think of the podcast. Leave your comments and questions and reach out to me on LinkedIn. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the cost of living crisis and the impact it's having on marketing and digital marketing in particular. I think this is a very, very relevant topic and a hot topic to discuss because I'm an agency owner. We work with clients that do everything from selling e-commerce products to everyday household items to furniture, etc. And right now, let's put it politely, the government's decisions have meant that people's pockets are a lot more stretched and not as deep as they were, let's say, post-pandemic. The issue we have there is that this can have a wider impact. So when we look at the overall cost of living, we just got to look at the fuel cost. Now, at the moment of recording, it cost me £1.95 to fill up my 1 litre hybrid eco boost Ford Focus, so £1.95 a litre of petrol right now. Absolutely ridiculous, especially when you've been watching, the news and you see the online breakdown of actually half of that, 45 to 50% of that just goes in tax. It's ridiculous. And that's just one element. And then you've got the increasing cost of gas, electric, household appliances, cost of increased inflation, council rates in the local area going up. You've got increasing costs of certain products as well. And because businesses are facing the same impact and increasing cost of delivery, services, fuel, whether you're a business doing transport or whether you do a business that delivers products. So if you're online e-commerce and you're offering free delivery, your actual profit margins are getting squeezed because as part of that free delivery, you've got to pay for the fuel to get that product to your actual household. So the cost of living crisis impacts businesses significantly because it's you, the consumers, who have the buying power, the spend, where we need you to invest into the economy and thus, support the economy and, allow people to get, real living earnable wages. And we talked about this in the previous few podcasts in terms of even just from our industry, a lot of sectors where recruitment is really, really hard. So it's going to have a big impact. It's going to have a big impact in terms of potentially from a recession. Now, I am no, economic expert. Let me make that very, 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 very clear. So before anyone says, oh, well, Mr. Bobble from Bobble Pod, said we were going to have a recession. Well, that's my opinion based on, the research. I always say this, go out, do your own research, do your own insights, read the Financial Times, follow economical posts, listen to what people in the housing market, development market and sectors are saying. I've done quite well as an agency owner. I mean, I could do a lot better. We're a small team, but what little profits I have, I was looking to invest into maybe building a property portfolio. And I've put a pause on that because the overwhelming feedback I'm getting is, yes, there's going to be a recession and it's probably going to impact those who, buy properties because housing pricing, the price of housing right now is so inflated. You're not getting properties at their actual value rate. You're having to pay above. So a lot of people right now putting their own money into that property, and that's the equity they're potentially going to lose. An example, I'm not going to say who, but a friend of mine came up to me, just bought a property during the housing boom when stamp duty was written off. They ended up paying about £30,000 more than the property value. Obviously, the mortgage company valued the property X amount, so they only got X amount mortgage based on the bank's mortgage provider saying this is what mortgage you get because we value this property at X amount, regardless if you're paying £35,000 plus. So on top of the deposit, the actual extra they paid has to come out of their own pocket. It didn't come from a mortgage. So what they've noticed now, and although they're doing fine, and I'm glad to hear it, is that when they calculated their cost of living in their house in terms of the gas bill, the electric bill, fuel costs, traveling from where they were to be a bit further out from the city centre because they wanted to be a bit more peaceful, so they didn't mind taking that extra time to travel. But that extra travel is a couple of miles extra, 2, 3, 4 miles extra day when you consider the cost of fuel. All this has a big impact on their living standards. And instead of having a buffer they were left with at the end of the month, that buffer's gone. So, and that was unforeseen. That's something they could not predict at that time. So that is a real example of how many, individuals, consumers, the public are going to be impacted by what will be a potential recession, but also right now in terms of how pockets are squeezed. And we're seeing this right now with some of our e-commerce clients. Revenue's down from the spend. And it's not like we're doing a bad job. You have to look at the economical environment that you're in and what impact that has. Results are only dependent on the ability to not just inform or educate the customer on the products or services you have, but focusing on a need. But sometimes even when a customer has a need for that product, if their pocket doesn't allow them to buy that product, then it's unethical for companies to kind of then really force that product onto them, because companies then have to consider that consumers' pockets are squeezed, they're not going to spend as much. One of our furniture clients, a very bespoke one, we cut back our services because we told them straight, you shouldn't be wasting this money on this element. Right now you need to weather the storm. And I feel like this current period is impacting more than COVID ever did. And it kind of shows the difference between a pandemic and a recession in terms of what happens and the impacts it has on you. And that's another example of how budgets are going to get squeezed. So as companies where consumers aren't buying enough and revenues drop down, they're not going to spend the same amount of media to achieve less results or less revenue. So naturally, they're going to start spending less and less and less. But unfortunately, and you might say, well, it's easy, Manny, for you to say that because you're not a business owner. I'm a business owner. We have our own marketing spends and budgets. But when it came to the pandemic, I doubled down and I invested hard into new business and content and really going for it as an agency, which is why we had a good year in 2022. It was probably on par with 2019, but we didn't have a worse year than 2019 when we weren't in the pandemic. And in that time, considering I even had a kidney transplant, 2021 was a record year for us, 300% increase in growth in revenue. And this year, we're looking to double our revenue this year. And it's not because I'm tight on the purse. We go out there, we have more leads than we can handle. And if you were listening to the previous podcast, we're not the one about stand out or die, but the one about agencies with Gareth Healy. We talked about the top 2 key challenges agencies have, and one was recruitment, which has now become the number 1. But second to that was, new business. And one thing I've really focused on, knowing that there's a recession coming, is making sure that pipeline is strong. Our brand presence is really, really strong. Now, the quality of the leads might not be as good as what we might be getting, but we're getting some really, really good leads right now because we're doing a lot. But we know that some of our clients will get impacted by the cost of living crisis because people, specifically e-commerce, because people will not have the same level of, buyer power because their budgets will be squeezed at home. And everything's dictated by the consumer when it comes to e-commerce or what they buy. And not everyone's on Amazon as well. Some people want to sell directly just to the website and they can't get onto Amazon. So there's a lot of variables different companies have to consider right now. And the impact is going to be bigger than what we assume it will be. I feel this government has let the people down. I feel like the government could be doing a lot more to be supporting businesses, a lot more to be supporting charities. An example I give, I was meeting one of our charities, the Royal Star and Garter, and they help veterans with care home. And they're discussing the cost of living crisis because you've got to have money to be able to give to charity. And unfortunately, when people's purses are hit, those charities aren't going to get those regular donations. Those, they're not going to be out spending, freely on products and services they might not necessarily need, but they were thinking of buying and trialing, but they won't be too bothered to spend 20, 30 pounds here or there. And that's going to have the biggest impact. And it's going to have the biggest impact on online e-commerce, because even though people will, still buy, and there'll be some customers out there, and we'll have to diversify and we'll have to come up with new strategies for our clients, is you got to plan ahead. The biggest impact is going to come on online. And the biggest sector is going to be impacted is retail as well. There'll always be a need for the basics, clothing, household amenities. And there'll be some people that, plan well, depending on where they live across the UK. But generally what we're already seeing is, for some clients, stagnation, where this time last year we were probably doing better. We're doing good. We're doing a good positive return on investment, return on ad spend, 10 to 15 times return on ad spend, which is fantastic when you think about the results. But we know, and they know, it could be better. And it's not because we're not outperforming or we're not delivering. It's because it's economical issues that actually impact marketing that we don't really consider. Now, one thing that clients should do, and one advice I'm going to give now, is if you're a company specifically within e-commerce, is you need to be planning for the recession. If there is a recession, you need to have a contingency plan in place. You need to have a contingency strategy in place, and you need to be thinking about the short term as well as the long term. Now, the best quote I can give is from, I talked about this at a talk for Leeds Trinity University about digital marketing in a pandemic world. And the only data I could rely on at that point was, well, we're in a recession style market. Companies have stopped spending. Everyone's gone from home. Everyone closed their fists and said no. Any kind of work that was meant to be done, holding all projects, wasn't just marketing companies. Any construction stuff got halted. People couldn't work together on certain projects. Any kind of investment or significant investment at that time got halted. And the only way to compare it was to a recession market. So I went away and did some research in the recession element. I was like, well, what should they do? And the quote I got was, it was the CEO of Walmart when he was asked in an interview in the last recession, he goes, what do you think about the recession? And he goes, his response was, I thought about it and decided I'm not going to participate. Now, you might think, well, that's Walmart. They're $1 billion company. And yes, they are $1 billion company and they've got money to spend. However, that mentality is what you should be thinking. Now, if you play into, it's like a go big or go home kind of mentality. You know what? If you're scared that your business is going to be impacted severely by a recession, that you might lose a significant amount of staff, you may even unfortunately go under. I say go out swinging, do something different, because if the outcome is what you think it's going to be, which is that the business doesn't cease or the business is going to take a number of steps backwards in terms of growth, what harm will it do to think out of the box and build your brand awareness and actually have a contingency in place? It might sound simple and you might think, oh, well, how do you do that? But that's where you got to really put your heads together and really, really, really understand your customer, your audience, understand the mindset they're in, because they might not be prepared to buy now, but they may be able to buy in 6 months' time. They may be able to buy in 12 months' time. So you've got to keep your brand awareness, your product, your services front of mind. And if you're not front of mind, anyone who does spend, I always say, in a recession style format, the statistics always show they grow in terms of market share, they grow in terms of brand recognition, they grow longer term in terms of actual sales and revenue that company picks up, because they stayed true to their customers, they built relationships with their customers, they were front of mind with their customers, and they supported their customers all the way through that pandemic. Now, I understand for a lot of the SMEs, we do have a good base of listeners that come from the SME market because they want to get the advice, the insights, and our knowledge. So my advice is to those companies is there's no reward without risk. Now, if you can say it's easy for me, I risked it all after pandemic. I had a kidney transplant. I wasn't working. I had a few clients and a few contractors working with us, but I was like, well, what's the alternative? Slowly run it down so it becomes nothing. Or the other alternative is actually do something, use my time productively, look at other ways in which I can engage with potential clients, start building relationships with people out there, use my time to improve our LinkedIn process, restructure the company. And we did restructure the company, new website, new focus, specialisms, everything we talked about in the previous 2 episodes, I started implementing and started doing. And now we're in a position where actually we're ready for a recession as an agency. The only thing that we're facing is recruitment and getting the right people on board. But I'm not concerned about new business. Not to say that I'm going to take my eye off the ball, but we continuously every month to invest back into new business, invest back into our employees so they deliver great results, which ultimately leads to them building better relationships with our clients, delivering better results for our clients, which they will benefit in the long term. So you might, if anyone turns around and says it's easy to, for you to say just to, spend more as a marketing agency, well, it's what I did. And I'm living off the fruits of that labor 2 years later when I'm looking back at being the best digital marketing agency in Leeds 2021 and 2022. That's no surprise. That is because we, did things differently. And there were bigger agencies around me collapsing at that time and, being impacted. So the cost of living will impact marketing. It's going to impact your business. It's going to impact your employees. It's going to impact it's going to impact that average order value on your website. And it's you as companies to work closely with your marketing agencies, to work closely with your internal marketing departments, to start coming up with contingencies and strategies in terms of, well, if we go into a full-on recession in the next 6 months, what are you doing now to build those relationships and building that pipeline with those customers that might not be ready to buy now, but might be ready to buy later? And it's the same for B2B. I know I've spent most of this talk talking about really e-commerce and B2C because in my opinion, that's what I think is going to be impacted the most. But B2B will be the same, where businesses will, the cost of like fuel, the cost of increasing prices, where especially businesses pay their own, gas and electric, it's going to impact them in terms of, their actual cost, their running costs as a business. So they will naturally look for savings elsewhere. And unfortunately, the biggest mistake most companies make, which sets them back years, is they cut back in the area they shouldn't, which is marketing. And whether that's internal or external, that's the one area you should never cut down on when you're struggling to get customers. You need to focus on, well, how do we attract new customers? How do we diversify? How do we provide more value? And how do we retain loyalty so that when things in the market and economics better and we ride through that difficult wave, we come out victorious on the other side? So I've gone on to a bit of more of a, I don't think this podcast is probably a bit different to what I've done before, but I really want to hit home on this one because the cost of living crisis is a crisis that is impacting a number of businesses in a number of different sectors. If you're worried and you're listening right now, then, there are things you can do. There are little tips and advice you can do. My element is focus on what you do well. Focus on building those relationships with those customers, not just short-term, long-term. Be ready to ride out the wave. But one thing you don't do is don't stop communicating and promoting and advertising and build brand affinity with your potential customers who will buy. If not now, they will eventually buy later. Think of the long term. A recession will end. Things will improve. Unfortunately, there'll be a lot of people that will get scorched by it. And let's hope, the impact is minimal. But start planning and implement some strategies and some wider digital marketing strategies or internal marketing strategies in place now that will help you in the long term. I'm going to wrap that up there. I feel like I've covered a lot of different elements there. But if you are worried about the cost of living crisis and the impact that's having on your business or you as an agency or in a marketing firm or your budgets, then drop a comment on the YouTube video, message and reach out to us. Let us know your thoughts and we'll pick up some more questions up in the upcoming news and roundup episodes. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe across YouTube and our podcast streaming platforms. I'm Manni Singh, or as we're now pushing out, Mr. Bobble.